Hello, my name is Alejandra Villalpando, and I will be presenting Welcome to the Renaissance through Leonardo da Vinci's eyes. So I chose The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci because I find that this is one of the most known and famous paintings of the Last Supper. I like that it has linear perspective as well as atmospheric perspective to showcase a three-dimensional space. The specimen is a mural painting. It's a religious mural painting. It is like The Last Judgment by Michelangelo. It is like it because it is also a big mural painting in a church. The precedence to Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper is paintings of the Last Supper. For example, Giotto in Scrovegni Chapel in Padua, we can see here that the disciples or apostles are all with a halo. They all have a halo. The linear perspective isn't very visible here. The figures seem a bit flat, although there is some shadow, and the faces, the facial expressions are very neutral, poker face like. This is another painting. This is by Andrea del Castagno in Santa Polonia, Florence. And here there is more of a linear perspective aspect. The subjects are somewhat more three-dimensional. We can see the lines and the shadows to create a sense of three-dimensional form. The antecedents to the painting would be the Introduction to Linear Perspective by Filippo Brunelleschi in the 1400s. And Leonardo da Vinci was intrigued by his findings and he studied them and incorporated it to his own paintings. So Leonardo da Vinci was the one who created the Last Supper. He was a very interesting man. He was a perfectionist. He took a while to complete the projects that he was commissioned for. He wanted things to be done in a specific way, hence why it would take him so long to complete his tasks. The person who commissioned the Last Supper was Ludovico Sforza. He was the Duke of Milan, and at the time he was the patron for Leonardo da Vinci. He commissioned this painting for the church. It was created in Maria del Grazie in Milan, Italy. The painting isn't actually in the actual church. It is in the dining hall of the monastery, which is where the cardinals would have their dinners. So here we can see the actual room where it's located. The people here are very crowded trying to take a picture or look at it, admire it. This is no longer a dining hall, but instead it is used for housing this painting, and people from all over the world come and see it. It was created from 1495 to 1498. It was during the Renaissance. The painting was accepted because Leonardo da Vinci was a very well-known artist, and the mural at the time was very vibrant in color, unlike other murals. It has stood the test of time in terms of what the painting is about and how much it is talked about after all of these years. In terms of its physical condition, it has not stood the test of time due to the way in which it was created. Murals at the time in Milan were usually frescoes, a method in which paint is applied to wet plaster. This allows for water-based paint to merge with the plaster and integrate into the wall. This allows for the mural to last longer in humid conditions. Da Vinci refused to create the mural with the fresco method because he preferred the freedom of oil paint. Due to the environmental conditions, such as the humidity of Milan, the painting is very worn down and faded away, as we can see here. So the painting was created in the context of the Last Supper being very popular at the time. It was usually painted inside dining halls of churches where the cardinals would eat, or the priests would eat there. And it was usually a symbol or a way for them to feel that Jesus was there present with them. So the message of this painting is that in general, this religious image is usually found in a dining room. The image is intended to signify Jesus is here. It is meant to make the audience feel as if they were part of that defining moment before Jesus was betrayed by Judas. Leonardo da Vinci painted the specific moment of the Last Supper. He painted the moment when Jesus said, "One of you will betray me." This can be inferred by looking at the apostles' facial expressions and body gestures, such as the way their bodies are leaning and their different hand movements. Through this, he was able to communicate shock, and for some of them, anger. Leonardo da Vinci has also created works of art such as the Mona Lisa and the Vitruvian Man. The Vitruvian Man was part of his journals, and since he was well-rounded, he would study science and math and proportions, and this is what was part of his studies. Other work that implies the same message would be The Birth of Venus by Sandro Botticelli, and this is the same message of I am here, I am important, feel my presence. The way that she is standing in contrapposto, the way that she carries herself is very welcoming. It was created with a double layer of gesso, pitch, and mastic. He used an undercoat of white lead to achieve the luminosity and intensity that he wanted for his colors. He used oil paint and tempera on top of the white lead to create vivid colors instead of desaturated colors. This painting is important to study because in terms of technicality and symbolism, it was one of the best at its given time. And right now, people still debate about it. Leonardo da Vinci was able to create an illusion of space and depth through one-point perspective as well as atmospheric perspective that can be seen through the window. In terms of symbolism, da Vinci places the head of Jesus strategically in the middle of the painting, making it the focal point. He also places him in the middle of the window to symbolize a halo, as can be seen here. Jesus' arms are also extended, one reaching for bread and the other reaching for a glass of wine. In religious terms, the bread signifies his body and the wine signifies his blood. Here is the bread and here is the wine. It can also be interpreted that he is reaching for the bowl that is right here, and Judas at the same time is reaching for that same bowl. This is important because in the Bible, it states that Christ said, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me." He also painted Judas as leaning back away from Jesus, cast in shadow and clutching a bag. The bag is very faded away, but this was his reward for turning Jesus in. And Peter is seen here holding a knife, meaning or symbolizing that he will defend Jesus against any threat. All of the apostles have an expression and their gestures. During the Renaissance, there was an interest in humanism, an intellectual movement typified by a revived interest in the classical world and studies which focus not on religion, but on what it is to be human. And Leonardo was very intrigued by this. He studied science and math, but he also showed interest in humanism. And this can be seen in this painting. Da Vinci studied human emotions and expressions and tried to render them in this painting. In terms of shape, we can see that Jesus is in an equilateral triangle. Right in the center, there is a semicircle on top of him. There is rectangles all throughout the ceiling, the windows, the tapestry, and the tablecloth. In terms of color, there is a lot of saturated color, vivid, not as vivid as it used to be, but we can still tell the color palette, the blues, the green, the tints of red throughout. And although it's been so many years and the painting has chipped away, we can still tell the difference between each of the colors. This is different compared to the background colors, which are more desaturated and muted. In terms of space, the subjects are the ones who create the positive space. They are mostly here, and the background would be the negative space. There's more content and color, the bottom half, where the positive space is, which could seem to make the painting look heavier, but the space on top balances out the heaviness, and the darker colors of the background also help with that. In terms of form, we can see the heads are in a spherical form rather than them being flat. Also the bread is an oval shape, but with the shadows and highlights, we can tell that it is a form rather than two-dimensional shape. In terms of line, there is a lot of leading lines coming from all over the painting. They lead the eyes. The tapestry is made of lines. The tablecloth is made of lines, and the ceiling, the clothing has a lot of lines to create the texture and the sense that it is soft rather than solid. There is a strong value contrast in this circled area. The very highlighted sky compared to the darkness of the wall creates emphasis and it leads the eye to the center of the painting and the focal point. In terms of texture, the tapestry has some visual texture, some design throughout, and the tablecloth, there's also a knot here and the lines making it seem like it's soft since it can turn into a knot rather than it being a solid block of a table. The hair is very textured too. You can see that some of it is curly and others are wavy. In terms of balance, there is symmetrical balance vertically. There is an equal amount of subjects to the right as there is to the left. In terms of horizontal balance, there is a lot of color in the bottom, but there is darker colors, darker values on the top, which balances out the composition. Unity. In terms of unity, all of the subjects have the same color of clothing, which creates unity. And the top half of the painting is also in similar colors, and altogether they create harmony. In terms of rhythm, there are 4 clusters, and each cluster is made up of 3 subjects. This creates repetition, which therefore creates rhythm throughout the painting. In terms of movement, the leading lines are the ones who create movement throughout the painting. Our eyes are leading us through the painting and taking us back. Our eyes can't seem to leave the painting with all of these leading lines. There's also movement with the subjects. Their hands are signaling a gesture. It seems like it was a photograph taken at a moment of a reaction and people are moving and shocked. In terms of pattern, there is pattern in the tablecloth and in the ceiling. There's also appears to be a pattern in the tapestry, but it is very worn down and hard to see. In terms of illusion, all the leading lines lead to one single point in the horizon line, and they all lead to the head of Jesus, which is where we find the emphasis, the focal point. There is the semicircle on top, makes the illusion of a circle, further emphasizing the notion of a halo around his head. Everything signals to his head. There's also the use of shadow and highlight, which allows for a sense of depth where there is a darker area as the room recedes to the back. In terms of emphasis, as I have stated, there is the circle, the illusion of the circle, which guides us to look at Jesus, which is the focal point, the main subject of the painting. There is a contrast of light and dark values. This is the most prominent area, so our eye gets led here. Again, with contrast, there is contrast between the wall, the light wall, and the dark wall, signaling that the back wall is further away from us. And there is contrast too within color. The muted colors in the top half and the more vibrant colors the bottom half create contrast between the top and bottom of the painting. In terms of semiotics, the icon would be a simplified illustration that looks like the Last Supper. We can see this by having a person in the middle, which could be interpreted as the main subject since he is right in the center, and there is a halo. Then there are people right next to him, an equal amount of people. And for index, wine and bread are an indication of the Last Supper, since that is where Jesus Christ institutes the Eucharist, where he signals that the bread signifies his body and the wine signifies his blood. And now whenever we see them together, it makes us think of the Last Supper, even if we don't have the painting right in front of us. And as a symbol, the Last Supper, the person who wrote the Bible decided to call it the Last Supper since it was the last dinner that Jesus had with the apostles. And we as a society have continued to accept this notion, this phrase, to mean that specific thing. So yes, this was my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you were able to understand, and thank you so much. Have a good day.